Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at Runadi, Behemoth Caller. It's a 3 mana 1/3, and whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, that creature enters the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters on it, where X is its mana value -4. Furthermore, creatures you control with 3 or more +1/+1 counters on them have haste. You can also tap him to add 1 green mana to your mana pool. This is a mono-green stompy deck that especially cares about creatures that either have additional +1/+1 counters on them, have the mana value 7 so they enter already with 3 +1/+1 counters to gain haste immediately, or simply other big synergistic creatures. As we are a mono-green deck, we do what we can do best in the early game, and that's ramp. Which is why we play cards like Exploration, a 1 mana enchantment, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. We play Emerald Medallion as we are a mono-colored deck, a 2 mana artifact, and green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Another great turn 1 play is Wild Growth, a 1 mana enchantment, and you enchant a land, and whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green mana. We will use 3 Visits, a 2 mana sorcery, search a library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. One of the few mana rocks that we play in this deck is Aired Heirloom, a 2 mana artifact, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. It also has another activated ability, because until end of turn, target creature you control with power 4 or greater gains trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Of course we gotta play my favorite green ramp spell, Traverse the Outlands, a 5 mana sorcery, search a library for up to X basic land cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle your library. Along the way, we want to commit card draw enchantments onto the battlefield to synergize with all of our other creatures that are about to come. So we play Garruk's Uprising, a 3 mana enchantment, and when this enchantment enters, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Furthermore, creatures you control have trample, and whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters, draw a card. This is also very synergistic with Runadi, simply because our creatures enter with additional +1/+1 counters, so if we are close to a critical number of less than 4, Runadi might make the job to draw us another card. We play Elemental Bond, a 3 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature you control with power 3 or greater enters, draw a card. Of course we will also use a very powerful sorcery, Rishkar's Expertise, a 6 mana sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Afterwards, you may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Another great enchantment, especially in monocolored decks, is Tribute to the World Tree, a 3 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Another powerful sorcery is Shamanic Revelation, a 5 mana sorcery, draw a card for each creature you control. Then, you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. And as Runadi also cares about mana value, we play Up the Beanstalk, a 2 mana enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. Okay, and now we come to the big stuff. These are a few bombs that we play in this deck. First up is Hierophant Biotitan, a 12 mana 12/12, and as an additional cost to cast a spell, you may remove any number of +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control, and this spell costs 2 less to cast for each counter removed this way. This cost reduction makes it a great play in your second main phase, simply because you will use your creatures first to attack due to them having haste, due to having at least 3 +1/+1 counters on them, and in your second main phase you can cast this one for just a few mana because you remove +1/+1 counters on them. It also has Vigilance, Reach and Ward 2, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. That one keyword that was always missing on Sire of 7 Death is haste, so let's fix that in this deck. Sire of 7 Deaths, a 7 mana 7/7 with first strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink and Ward pays 7 life. We also go with Quilled Great Worm, a 6 mana 7/7 with Trample, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage on your turn, you put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Furthermore, you may cast this card from your graveyard by removing 6 counters from among creatures you control in addition to paying its other costs, which is a great backup solution simply if this card gets milled or other things. We play Colonian Hydra, a 5 mana 0/0 with Trample, and it enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Furthermore, when it attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Colonian Hydra is by far one of the best creatures in this deck, simply because of its great synergy with Runadi and continuing to antheming up all of our creatures. We play Canopy Gargantuan, a 7 mana 7/7 with flying and ward 2, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put a number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control equal to that creature's toughness. And finally, we play Zurich and Gorklaw, a 6 mana 6/5 with trample, and other creatures you control have trample. Furthermore, whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it and it gains haste until end of turn. This is not only a great backup haste enabler compared to Runadi, it also synergizes with Runadi as it also puts +1/+1 counters on our creatures. Once we have established a threatening board of powerful creatures, we need to protect them. This is why we play cards like Heroic Intervention, a 2 mana instant, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. A great single target protection spell is Defend the Rider, a 1 mana instant, choose one, target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, or you create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this creature settles mounts and cruise vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. As this deck cares a lot about +1/+1 counters, we play Inspiring Call, a 3 mana instant, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, and then those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. A very flexible protection spell is Collective Resistance, a 2 mana instant with Escalate for 1 green mana. It says choose one or more, destroy target artifact, target enchantment, or target creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. The best single target protection spell is Tamiyo's Safekeeping, a 1 mana instant, target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn and you gain 2 life. And last but not least, we play Taiva Stand, a 1 green and X instant, and target creature you control gets +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You want to win more? You get it. We played the Earth Crystal, a 4 mana legendary artifact, and green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Furthermore, if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. It also has an activated ability. For 6 mana, you tap it and you distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. This artifact basically does it all for us as it discounts our spells, synergizes with our +1/+1 counters, and can also deploy them by itself. We play Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, a 3 mana 2/3, and you can tap her to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but you can only spend this mana on creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. Furthermore, whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna and untap it. This is simply a great mana dog in this deck simply because we play very big creatures in this deck, and Gwenna can really scale up our mana acceleration due to her untap mechanic, which can lead to very powerful turns and also game-winning turns simply because we have an haste enabler in our command zone. And last but not least, we play Old Gnarbone, a 7 mana 7/7 with flying, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. It is widely known how strong this effect of Old Gnarbone is, but especially in this deck it's extremely powerful, simply because he will enter with 3 +1/+1 counters due to Runadi's trigger, and so can immediately attack in the air with 10 power, which will most likely net you a bunch of treasures. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Runadi, Behemoth Caller. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.